Hi, everyone, and welcome to our very first episode of Talk Evil to Me. I am your host, Katie.
And I'm your host, Tim.
And we are so excited that you're here. We are going to get started off today with our very first case ever we're covering. This is one that has intrigued me since about middle school. So it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I'm about 110 years old.
Give or take a few.
Give or take a few. Trigger warning though, this case does contain sexual assault, so if that's something that you are uncomfortable with, I would suggest not listening to this one. All right, so we have Man Yee. She was born in 1976. She didn't have a very good life to start off. Her parents abandoned her when she was really young. I couldn't find out how young. It just said anywhere I looked, young age. Anywhere I looked, I also could not find an actual birth date for her. Just 1976. So she just kind of like appeared one day. Anyway, so she was abandoned by her family as a child and she was forced to be raised in an all-girls home. When she turned 15, she was kicked out of the all-girls home because they have a age restriction policy. So as soon as you're 15, you're out on the streets, which also doesn't make very much sense to me because I'm not sure how you just kick a teenage child out into the middle of nowhere and expect them to live their life.
Unless they have what we have here and you age out.
Well, she did age out, but at 15. Here it's 18. You're an adult and you can do things. What are you going to do at 15?
Maybe you're an adult there.
I don't really think so. So, homeless and on the streets, Fan found drugs, which was not, the best thing for her. They became a regular part of her daily routine, and unfortunately, drugs cost money. And a 15-year-old with no job and no home and no family and no support has no money. So she needed to find a place to get that, and she turned to prostitution. She worked on the streets for about 3 years until 1994. She got a job at a place called the Romance Villa in Sham Shui Po. It was this cute little brothel where, you could go in and pay and have some fun and go home. At the brothel, Fan had quite a few regular clients. One client in particular, Ing Chi Yuen, he was quite fond of her. She was quite fond of him. They started to see each other outside of the brothel. And then 2 years later, in 1996, they got married. Then they got an apartment together. They started to live their life. He was also a drug addict, so that's kind of all they did, really. They had sex, did drugs, screamed at each other. Sounds really good. It's a really good time.
Sounds like love right there.
It's a really good time. The neighbors would constantly complain of screaming and crying and yelling coming from their apartment. It didn't say anything about any welfare checks or police being called or anything, just noise complaints. So it just continued to happen. In 1998, 2 years after they were married, Fawn found out that she was pregnant. And that kind of changed the way that she looked at everything because she didn't want her child growing up in a house of abuse. She already didn't have a good childhood to begin with, so she didn't want her kid to have a shitty childhood. So she decided that she was going to give them a better one. And she left her husband, she quit her job, and she went on the hunt for a new job. And she got one at the Empress Karaoke Club. She was a hostess at the club. At the Empress Club, she ran into one of her other regular clients that she knew from the Romance Villa. The other client's name was Chan Man Lak. He was 33 years old at the time. He was a member of the Triad, Chinese Transnational Organized crime group with a pretty decorated rap sheet. He was arrested previously for extortion, prostitution, drug trafficking. He just all around was not a good guy. At the brothel, he would pay her shit tons of money for long sex sessions and ice binges, which I had to Google what ice binges were because I don't know my drugs, and it's crystal meth.
Interesting.
So lots of good money for crystal meth. After they recognized each other, Fan was back in Chan's circle, exchanging sexual favors for money and drugs. During one of these meets, she stole his wallet. And let's just go back to the part where he's really just not a good guy. He's part of a gang. Not good. Don't do that. Okay?
All right, I'll try
If
not
you're
to.
ever prostituting for a gang member, just like don't take their wallet.
I'll try.
Let them have you. Okay. All right.
No promises.
I'm not coming to get you. So she stole his wallet, which was said to have 4,000 Hong Kong dollars in it. US dollars is about 510. So, I
Still
mean,
quite a bit of money.
it's still quite a bit of money. And, you know, in the year that it was in,
Definitely a lot of money.
it's a lot of money. You know, 1998, $510 was worth a whole lot more than it is now. Not that $510 isn't like still a lot, but it did not take him very long to realize that she stole his wallet, and he demanded that she pay him back the original 4,000 Hong Kong dollars with interest of 10,000 Hong Kong dollars. So altogether, 14,000, which equated to around 1,700 US dollars, almost 1,800, 1,787 US dollars to be exact. It is widely speculated that she stole this money to pay for her grandma's hospital bills. It was never proven, but like a lot of the things are saying that's why she took it, which is kind of like a really sad reason.
You think it'd be more towards, you know, that kid of hers, but
yes, but also if she had a grandma, I'm not sure that she also would have ended up in
these terrible situations.
No, in an all girls home. Like if her family abandoned her, where did the grandma come from? And why didn't the grandma take her? Unless it was like a grandma she found after, like later on in life when she was in her 20s or something, like that she just didn't know about. I don't know. But it's speculated. There's no actual proof that she stole the money for her grandma. So she returned his 4,000 Hong Kong dollars immediately, but obviously needed time to come up with the 10,000 Hong Kong dollars because she didn't have that. Otherwise, she wouldn't be stealing it from a man who is bad. He agreed to give her time. You know, he was trying to be a good guy and give her time to get the money that she needed. And then his graciousness ran out when she started to dodge all his phone calls and avoid him, like, at all costs. So, lesson number 1, do not steal someone's wallet. Lesson number 2, do not avoid their phone calls when you have to pay them back for the money you stole from their wallet. Kids are playing basketball. You got it.
I don't know, it can just be all backboard.
That was the rim, but it's all right. So, after his graciousness ran out, he sent his 2 henchmen to go get her. 26-year-old Leong Sing Cho and 21-year-old Leong Y Lun. He sent them to her apartment to kidnap her and force her into prostitution to repay her stolen debts. So they went to her apartment in the middle of the day, forced her away with them, and brought her to an apartment building that Chan lived in. It was 4 stories high, 2 apartments on each floor. Chan's apartment was a 5-bedroom penthouse on the 3rd floor of the apartment building, and it was very, very creepily decorated in Hello Kitty shit. Just curtains, blankets, sheets, dolls, plushies, figurines. If he could be Hello Kitty, I'm sure that he would.
That should have been her first red flag.
Well, you see, she didn't go there on purpose. She didn't wish that wasn't.
And then maybe she went there prior.
But you know, that's
but her being kidnapped in her own flat, I'm assuming they just left her child there? Or do we not know?
Don't know. Especially because she was supposed to be living in the apartment with her kid.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody ever reported her missing. So
as far as we know, that kid is left alone.
As far as we know. But, you know, we'll get there. So they brought her back to this apartment building on the 3rd floor, and all decorated out in Hello Kitty, like a manly apartment, like a man's apartment, Hello Kitty, you know? While it was Chan Man Lok's apartment, all 3 of them stayed there because they were all part of like the gang. So like they all had like their own places, but then for the most part they all stayed there because they were all doing sketchy shit together. And amongst them was 14-year-old Lau Ming Feng. Now, Lau Ming Feng was the girlfriend of Xing Cho, who I don't know if you remember, but he is 26 years old. So that's disgusting. Once they had Fan in the apartment, Chan Man Lok he was angry. He was mad. He wanted to know where his money was. So once they had her in the apartment, he began to like scream at her and ask her why she was dodging his phone calls, why she hadn't paid him back yet. But he didn't actually even give her a chance to answer. He just kind of started to attack her. He kicked her down to the floor and he began to kick her in the head. He kicked her over 50 times, counting out loud each time as he kicked her, just because it was like a fun little game to him. Everything that these people did was because it was like a fun little game to them. They completely irrelevant to them that she was a human being that they were doing these things to. It was fun. So they were only going to kidnap her and force her into prostitution long enough to pay back the 10,000 Hong Kong dollars that she owed. But clearly they couldn't hold it together for the first 5 seconds that this woman was in the apartment. So I didn't really have high hopes of them keeping it together much longer after that just for prostitution. It got pretty out of hand and they decided prostitution was not enough of a punishment for her crime. Like they decided this, that, you know, they were the judge, the juror, and everybody else. They restrained her with her wrists tied together and arms hung above her head. She had like just enough slack for her toes to touch the floor so that she could stay standing up and not be like just hanging from her wrists. They began using her as a human punching bag. They would just just punch her and laugh. She was just hanging there. She could barely fucking stand up. And they're just using her as a literal punching bag. Meanwhile, this 14-year-old girl is just sitting there watching too. I can't. Once punching and kicking her no longer fulfilled them, they began raping her repeatedly and beating her with metal pipes instead of their fists because it just wasn't doing it for them anymore. So they would just take turns raping her and beating her and raping her and beating her. And I believe Lau Ming Feng said at some point they were beating her while raping her because that's always fun. The raping and beating still was not enough though. They were bored out of their methods and they would cut her and rub salt and chili oil into her open wounds. Right.
Sounds very pleasant.
But what kind of psychopath is like, I know, I'm gonna rub chili oil in there?
Well, it doesn't surprise me from a person who has their apartment decked out
in
Hello Kitty. Full of surprises.
Yeah. Aside from rubbing the chili oil into her open wounds, they would also take plastic straws and hold a lighter to them and just let the plastic melt onto the bottoms of her feet until her feet were just full of huge blisters and burns, so that even the little bit of her feet that were touching the floor were just in agonizing pain.
Interesting.
I don't understand how people's brains come up with these torture methods, which I should probably do an episode not on a person, but on torture methods.
See, I can do that.
I think that would be interesting.
I got my own ways.
Just gonna put that in there for later, you know? Write it down. She was restrained for most of the day standing up the way that she was. They would allow her to come down and sleep on the floor every now and then.
Oh, how nice of them.
I know, they were such good people. While they all went to bed. They did admit, though, one night that they made her sleep in this, like, super tiny wooden wardrobe just because they thought it was funny how tightly packed she was in there. And they didn't let her out until the morning. She never tried to run away from them, which I'm assuming is because...
Her feet.
One, her feet, and two, she was...